Take a moment and look at these two chocolate bars. Same brand, same size, same ingredients. The only difference? One of them costs 120% more, simply because it was bought at an airport. Most travelers expect higher prices, but very few realize how extreme the markup actually is. That Chili's burger you see here, it's priced 46% higher than what you'd pay for the exact same meal outside the airport. And this isn't just about convenience. Across the United States, many airports are run by authorities that aren't directly accountable to the public in the way most people assume. But the real issue goes even deeper. Passengers aren't just paying more because they're stuck behind security. They're paying more because there's almost no real competition. Look closely at this food court. It feels like you have choices, 6 different brands, 6 different signs, but behind the scenes, every single one of these outlets is operated by the same multi-billion-dollar corporation. So how did airport food and retail become this expensive? And why are prices at some airports still climbing even higher? The rise of airports. To understand why you can walk past 5 Starbucks in one terminal, we need to rewind to the early 20th century, back when airports functioned more like basic transit hubs, not destinations. Early travelers regularly complained that airports were cramped, poorly maintained, and unpleasant places to spend time. Any sense of luxury came after boarding the plane, not before it. The cabin experience was where airlines showed off comfort and service. But for commercial aviation to expand, airports themselves had to change, and that meant finding ways to improve facilities while generating their own revenue. So airports experimented with anything that could bring in money. Some built observation decks to attract visitors. Others leased land for oil drilling, added swimming pools, or even tennis courts. Parking fees slowly emerged as a major income source. Small stands popped up wherever space allowed. At one point, airports even tried pay toilets. Every coin mattered. By the mid-20th century, airports began opening full-service restaurants designed to attract not just passengers, but locals as well. These weren't fast food counters, they were upscale dining spots. In many cities, people celebrated anniversaries there. Teenagers went to prom dinners inside airport terminals. One postcard from the era proudly described a hometown airport restaurant as the Midwest's most distinctive dining and cocktail lounge. And by the 1960s, new terminals themselves became architectural showpieces, symbols of progress and modern travel. All of these amenities served 2 purposes: encouraging people to fly and creating steady income streams. This period became known as the Golden Age of aviation. Inside the aircraft, everything felt calm, polished, almost luxurious, like a perfect summer morning. But air travel back then was still out of reach for most people. Tickets were expensive, flights were limited, and passengers were mainly wealthy travelers or business executives. And because flights weren't packed and connections were rare, travelers didn't spend much time inside airports anyway. That entire system changed in 1978. Deregulation changed everything. In 1978, Congress reshaped the airline industry almost overnight. Airlines were suddenly free to choose their own routes and set their own fares. Competition exploded, and ticket prices dropped fast. What followed was a full-blown fare war. Flights became cheaper than ever, but the trade-off was immediate. The luxury of air travel faded. Gourmet meals disappeared. Free perks vanished. Passengers went from multi-course dinners to pretzels, peanuts, and a soda. Even complimentary cigarettes were gone. For people who had worked in aviation during the Golden Age, it felt like the industry they knew no longer existed. Lower fares brought more passengers, but service quality declined just as quickly. The result? Air travel became accessible to millions more Americans. Within a decade, the number of people flying each year nearly doubled. Students, budget travelers, and families could now afford to fly, groups that previously stayed grounded. Airports under pressure. By the 1980s, another shift took place. Airlines moved toward hub-and-spoke systems, which meant more connecting flights. Passengers weren't just passing through airports anymore, they were waiting there. This surge overwhelmed airport infrastructure. Terminals built for smaller crowds suddenly had to handle non-stop foot traffic. Options were limited: a newsstand, maybe a quick-service restaurant, and little else. And even then, passengers were already complaining about markups ranging from 50 to 100%. Airports and airlines recognized the same problem at the same time. If travelers were going to spend hours waiting, the experience had to improve, or at least feel less frustrating. How airports became malls. The solution wasn't subtle. Airports turned into shopping centers. In the early 1990s, Pittsburgh International Airport unveiled a new model. With more than 100 shops and restaurants, it became the first U.S. airport to intentionally design its terminal like a mall. The idea worked immediately. Passengers were more comfortable, and airports unlocked a powerful new revenue stream. Every store paid rent, and airport income jumped. According to one report, Pittsburgh's non-airline revenue rose by 75% in just 6 years. What made this especially notable was pricing. Pittsburgh adopted a policy called street pricing, meaning items sold inside the airport had to cost the same as they did outside. Local officials even bragged that they were the first airport not to overcharge travelers. Other airports rushed to replicate the model, investing tens of millions into renovations. And to address passenger complaints, many followed Pittsburgh's lead on pricing, at least at first. Why prices still keep rising. So if street pricing was common in the 1990s and early 2000s, why does that airport chocolate bar now cost more than double? The answer lies in a newer system called Street Pricing Plus. Under this model, airports allow businesses to charge the regular street price plus an extra 10 to 15%. Airport authorities argue that this surcharge fairly accounts for higher operating costs. Price caps are set by whoever controls the airport, and vendors are technically not allowed to exceed them. In theory, that should keep prices only slightly higher than outside. Airports also claim they audit prices several times a year. But in practice, how street price is calculated often leaves room for manipulation. When oversight falls apart. Take that $14 chocolate bar at LaGuardia Airport in New York City. LaGuardia is managed by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which requires vendors to base prices on the average cost of comparable items sold outside the airport plus 15%. According to the Port Authority, this was the price District Market used as justification, but when prices were checked in person, the math didn't add up. One nearby store didn't sell the bar at all, the other two sold it for less than what District Market claimed. Despite this discrepancy, the Port Authority didn't announce any price corrections. Weak enforcement means these cases aren't rare, they're common. When plus 10% becomes much more. Consider a traveler flying out of Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, looking for a familiar snack. In August 2025, the airport told Business Insider it follows street pricing plus 10% policy. But inside a Hudson News store, a pack of M&Ms cost 69% more than the same item at a Walgreens outside the airport. A Chick-fil-A chicken biscuit meal rang up at more than 16% above street price. And one of the most extreme examples was a yogurt marked up by 84%. When asked about these gaps, a spokesperson for the Metropolitan Airports Commission said prices are audited twice a year or as needed, but declined to explain the disparities. The policy exists, the limits exist, but without strong enforcement, passengers still end up paying far more than promised. Operating a business inside an airport. Industry insiders often defend higher prices by arguing that operating inside an airport simply costs more than running a store on the street. Every employee, delivery, and piece of equipment has to clear security. Construction takes longer. Labor rules are stricter. According to industry estimates, building and running a location inside an airport can cost 30 to 40% more than a comparable business outside. On top of that, many cities require higher minimum wages for airport workers. Hours are also longer and less flexible. Most airport businesses are expected to operate from early morning until late at night, often around 4 a.m. to midnight. Even brands that specialize in one type of food are pushed to serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, regardless of whether that fits their model. Then there's rent. Airport businesses don't just pay a flat lease, they also give the airport a percentage of their sales. Depending on the contract, that cut can range from 6% to 20%, with most vendors paying somewhere between 10 and 16%. All of this does raise costs, but it doesn't explain everything. The competition problem no one talks about. What's usually left out of these explanations is a much bigger factor. There isn't real competition inside most airports. In the United States, the vast majority of airport food and retail is controlled by just 6 major corporations. Their names aren't widely known, but their presence is everywhere. Globally, these companies operate more than 13,000 locations. Take the food court at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. It looks like you're choosing between multiple brands. In reality, all 6 of those restaurants are run by a single operator, HMS Host. And the consolidation goes even deeper. HMS Host is owned by Avolta, which also controls duty-free shops and Hudson News at the same airport. Stores that appear independent, like Prairie Market, are often just different branding under the same corporate umbrella. Even the loyalty programs give it away, quietly advertising Avolta's reward system. This pattern repeats across the country. At parts of LaGuardia Airport in New York City, Avolta branding is nearly impossible to avoid. Another major player, OTG, runs roughly 350 locations across North America. One of its airport markets was selling yogurt at an 84% markup compared to street prices. After being contacted, OTG said it reduced the price to roughly what customers would pay outside the airport. Many airport locations involve multiple partners, but the large concessionaire almost always holds controlling power. And when the same handful of companies operate most of the stores in a terminal, meaningful price competition disappears. When price limits start to disappear, industry consolidation is accelerating through mergers and acquisitions, and as these companies grow larger, they gain more influence over airport policies, including pricing rules. In some cases, they've pushed airports to loosen or eliminate price caps entirely. Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport dropped street pricing in 2019 after major concessionaires like HMS Host and SSP argued that existing limits were too restrictive. Once those caps are removed, there's effectively no ceiling on what vendors can charge. And when nearly every option inside a terminal is owned by the same few operators, passengers have no alternative. High prices become the norm, not because they're unavoidable, but because there's nowhere else to go. This lack of choice became even more significant after September 11, 2001. Dwell time, waiting that pays. After 9/11, new security requirements permanently changed how long passengers spend inside airports. That waiting period has a name: dwell time, the stretch of time travelers spend inside the terminal after clearing security. And research shows something airports understand very well: more waiting leads to more spending. Studies indicate that around 63% of passengers on the secure side of the airport make some kind of purchase. Part of that spending comes from necessity, but much of it comes from boredom. The average traveler now spends about 2 hours inside an airport. Only the most experienced flyers consistently avoid this trap. People who bring empty bottles through security and refill them at water fountains instead of buying drinks, but they represent a very small minority. Airports are designed around this behavior. The goal isn't just to move passengers efficiently, it's to reduce stress while guiding them into areas where they'll spend more time after security, where food and retail options are impossible to miss. For more than 2 decades, airports and concession operators have quietly optimized dwell time, and the strategy has paid off. In most terminals, reaching your gate without walking past multiple restaurants or stores is nearly impossible. There's even psychology behind it. When food smells trigger hunger, people are far more likely to buy. That reaction isn't accidental. It's central to the airport business model. Where airport money really comes from. Today, U.S. airports earn nearly half of their total revenue from non-aeronautical sources, things like parking, food, and retail purchases. Airport operators openly acknowledge that growing this category is a top priority. It helps protect them from uncertainty in airline travel and economic swings. The results are clear. In 2024, U.S. airports generated more than double the food and beverage revenue they did in 2010. A different model that actually works. So, is there anywhere in the U.S. where travelers don't pay a premium? There are very few. But one notable exception is Portland International Airport, PDX. PDX doesn't use street pricing plus, it follows pure street pricing. Whatever a business charges at its downtown location is exactly what it must charge at the airport. No added fees, no percentage markup. Instead of squeezing vendors through higher prices, the airport adjusts what it takes based on a business's total sales volume. That structure gives operators room to succeed without pushing costs onto passengers, and the model has worked. At PDX, average passenger spending is about $15.30 per traveler, roughly 20% higher than the national average of $12.50. Despite that success, industry insiders don't expect many airports to follow Portland's lead. Once an airport commits to a higher markup system, reversing course becomes extremely difficult. Airports are still getting more expensive. In fact, many airports are moving in the opposite direction. Los Angeles International Airport used street pricing plus 18% for years, but in 2025, it removed pricing caps on most items, citing rising airport minimum wages. Industry groups representing airport restaurants and retailers now advocate for flexible pricing, which in practice means no limits at all. They argue that passenger satisfaction matters more than price. Meanwhile, the largest airport concession companies remain focused on a single metric: spend per passenger. Avolta, one of the industry's biggest players, openly states that its long-term strategy is to increase how much each traveler spends and maximize the profitability of airport commercial space. So far, that strategy is delivered. Passenger breaking point. But there are signs the system may be reaching its limits. A J.D. Power 2024 survey of North American airports found that passengers spent less inside terminals than they did the year before. Food and beverage pricing has also ranked as the lowest scoring category in customer satisfaction surveys for several years. In May 2025, members of Congress asked the Federal Trade Commission to investigate pricing at airports and stadiums, warning that travelers with few options face extreme markups for basic food and drinks. It's a frustration many travelers recognize immediately, like paying $16 for a beer on the way home from a work trip. Even longtime industry professionals acknowledge the problem. After decades in airport retail, some admit the system could work better. The belief is simple: friendlier, fairer spaces don't just feel better, they often make more money. And until that balance changes, buying your favorite snack before you arrive at the airport might save you more than you think.